In the news tonight, in his address to the UN General Assembly, His Majesty the King says the future is under a serious threat from the outlaws of Islam and that the world is united that terrorists must be defeated. Russia appears to seize the initiative in international efforts to end the conflict in Syria, while Washington seeks a new strategy for the war-ravaged country. And dozens of Palestinian worshippers are injured by Israeli forces in renewed clashes that erupted at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in occupied East Jerusalem. Good evening and welcome to the 10 o'clock news. His Majesty the King called on world leaders to defeat the outlaws of Islam, or the Khawarij, operating globally and using suspicion and ignorance to expand their power. In his address to the UN General Assembly, King Abdullah said Jordan has been proud to work with all countries to spearhead tolerance and dialogue. The crisis of the Syrian refugees also figured high on the King's speech. It's high time, the King said, that the international community acts collectively in facing the crisis. Here's a recording of the speech.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Mr. President, Secretary General, Your Excellencies, thank you. It is an honor to stand before this distinguished General Assembly. I'm here representing Jordan and as a God-fearing, God-loving human being. I'm here as a father who wants his children, like yours, to live in a compassionate and more peaceful world. Such a future is under serious threat from the Khawarij, the outlaws of Islam that operate globally today. They target religious differences, hoping to kill cooperation and compassion among the billions of people of all faiths and communities who live side by side in our many countries. These outlaw gangs use suspicion and ignorance to expand their own power, and worse still is the free hand they grant themselves to distort the word of God, to justify the most atrocious of crimes. All of us here are united by our conviction that these forces must be defeated. But before we ask how to achieve this objective, let us ask, what if they were not defeated? What would our world look like? Can we tolerate a future where mass murder, public beheadings, kidnapping, and slavery are common practices? Where the persecution of communities is law? Where humanity's cultural treasures, preserved for thousands of years, are systematically destroyed? I have called this crisis a third world war, and I believe we must respond with equal intensity. That means global collective action on all fronts. But make no mistake, the more important war is the one we wage on the battlegrounds of the heart, the soul, and mind. And in this fight, all countries, all people must come together. Jordan has been proud to work with you and your countries to spearhead global initiatives for tolerance and dialogue. This has been reflected in the Amman message and a common word. And 4 years ago, we helped create the UN's Global Interfaith Harmony Week, an event to focus all people, especially young people, on the essentials of tolerance and coexistence. Now, these efforts must continue, and the UN has a central role. But all of us as individuals and as leaders must help build the road ahead. And let me suggest 7 essential steps. First, let us get back to basics, to the essence and shared spirit of our respective faiths and creeds. It seems to me that we can sometimes lose sight of the larger picture. What separates humanity is minuscule compared to what we hold in common. Deep values of love, peace, justice, and compassion. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wa rahmati wasi'at kulla shay'in. And my mercy embraces all things. Second, let us change our tone. On my travels not long ago, I saw a road sign that said, "Fear God." A few miles down the road was another saying the same thing, then another. And then a final one saying, "Oh, you will go to hell." And I thought, when and how did fear and intimidation creep so insidiously into our conversation when there is so much more to be said about the love of God? Now, most people may think they have nothing to do with the hate expressed by extremists. But our world is also threatened when violence, fear, and anger dominate our discourse, whether in school lessons or weekly sermons or international affairs. Third, let us act upon our beliefs. And here I mean the more than praying or fasting or zakat. I mean integrating our values in every part of our daily lives, every hour of every day, by loving our neighbor, showing respect to those different from us, by being kind to our children. Each one of us can do something to reflect the spirit of our Creator. Fourth, let us amplify the voice of moderation. It is one of the greatest ironies of our time that extremist voices use advanced media to propagate ignorant ideas. We must not let our screens, airwaves, broadband, and social media be monopolized by those who pose the greatest danger to our world. We too must populate our media, and more important, the minds of our young people with the purity and power of moderation. Fifth, let us recognize deceit. When we examine the motives of these outlaws, the Khawarij, and indeed the motives of extremists on all sides, we find hunger for power and control of people, of money, of land. They use religion as a mask. Is there a worse crime than twisting God's word to promote your own interest? Is there a more despicable act than feeding on the vulnerable and the innocent to recruit them to your ranks? In the global Muslim community, 1.7 billion good men and women, a quarter of humanity, today's outlaw gangs are nothing but a drop in an ocean. But a drop of venom can poison a well. We must protect the purity of our faith from worldly contamination. As Muslims, this is our fight, as it is our duty. Sixth, by all means, let us be intolerant of intolerance. Extremists rely on the apathy of moderates. But moderation does not mean accepting those who trample on others and reject all who differ. Today's global fight is not between peoples, communities, or religions. It is between all moderates of all faiths against all extremists in all religions. Leaders of every country, every belief, every neighborhood need to take a clear and public stand against intolerance of any kind. And this includes respecting all places where God is worshipped, whether mosque, church, synagogue, or temple. And nothing can be more important and can have more impact in framing this respect and coexistence than Jerusalem. The Hashemite custodianship of Jerusalem's Islamic and Christian holy sites is a sacred duty, and we join Muslims and Christians everywhere in rejecting threats to the holy places and the Arab character of this holy city. My friends, our seventh step is hyperconnectivity. In our era, connectivity defines how we live and interact in our work, our communities, our schools, our lives. Only a few years ago, we had the Internet of computers. Now we talk about the Internet of things. But above them all must be the Internet of humanity. A hyperconnection bringing us together in collective consciousness and common cause. Ladies and gentlemen, by gathering here today, we acknowledge that the power of working together far exceeds any individual effort. This great General Assembly must address urgent world issues, sustainable inclusive development that can deliver more opportunity, especially to young people, and peaceful political solutions to regional crises. It is the world's obligation to find solutions and provide relief for the millions of refugees in my region. Today, we are still facing huge shortfalls, cuts, and threats to vital UN programs and agencies, including UNRWA, UNHCR, and WFP. Today, we are haunted by the images of thousands of refugees on the shores and borders of Europe, seeking hope far away from their homeland. In Jordan, we have been faced with this challenge since the beginning of the Syrian crisis. Today, Syrian refugees alone constitute 20% of my country's population. We have been taking on a significant part of the burden of this humanitarian disaster off the international community's shoulders since the beginning. However, support to our country has been a small fraction of the cost we have endured. It is high time that the international community acts collectively in facing this unprecedented humanitarian crisis and support countries like Jordan and Lebanon, which have been carrying the brunt of this burden for over the past 4 years. My friends, in these areas, we must act and act collectively for the future of our world. And connectivity is key. The values we share, equality, compassion, hope, need to be connected to everything we do. And we must keep ourselves connected to each other for the good of all. These bonds are the power and promise of our United Nations. Here together we can and must create the future our people need. A safer, stronger world of coexistence, inclusion, shared prosperity, and peace. 7 steps can bring us closer to our destination. God willing, our countries and peoples will achieve these and many more. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the King of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan for his statement just made. May I request representatives to remain seated while we greet His Majesty.
On the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, King Abdullah held a series of meetings with world leaders on regional conflicts and bilateral issues. More in this report.
Syria, the fight against terrorism and other regional conflicts topped the agenda during a series of bilateral meetings King Abdullah had with world leaders on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. The king said at a meeting with Austrian President Heinz Fischers, there is a need that international organizations and donors offer more support for Jordan to provide humanitarian services to Syrian refugees. The king and Fischers agreed that a political solution should be found to end the suffering of Syrians and maintain the country's unity. They said international efforts should be ramped up to fight terrorism and extremism and protect the security of the region and the world. King Abdullah told Kosovo President Atifat Yahyaga that global anti-terrorism efforts should be coordinated to dry up the sources of terrorism and spread the true Islamic principles of tolerance and moderation. The king and Malian President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita agreed on the need to put forward an anti-terror strategy and said international and regional efforts should be coordinated to deal firmly with the menace of extremism within a holistic approach. In a separate meeting, His Majesty discussed with British Prime Minister David Cameron and World Bank Group President Jim Yong Kim devising aid programs to Jordan to enable the kingdom to shoulder the burden of hosting Syrian refugees. The meeting tackled the repercussions of the Syrian refugee crisis on Jordan and ways and means of providing aid, grants and financing to the kingdom. They reviewed ways to upgrade infrastructure in Jordan's developmental zones and attract investment to these areas. His Majesty and Turkish Prime Minister Ahmed Davutoglu also discussed regional cooperation to confront terrorism and extremism. King Abdullah and Davutoglu said a political solution should be found to the Syrian crisis to stop the bloodshed and end the chaos in the country. They also stressed the importance of international aid to regional countries hosting Syrian refugees to carry out their humanitarian role towards the displaced Syrians. The Turkish Prime Minister stressed the importance of the Hashemite custodianship of Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque and Ankara's support of His Majesty's pivotal role against Israeli policies that aim at changing the status quo in the Holy City. The meeting also dealt with stabilizing Iraq and preserving its unity and sovereignty, stressing the need to work with all Iraqis to fight terror. The Palestinian-Israeli conflict also took center stage during talks between King Abdullah and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. The King and Kerry agreed Israel should stop all attacks and violations against Al-Aqsa Mosque and Al-Haram Al-Sharif compound. During the meetings attended by His Royal Highness Crown Prince Hussein, King Abdullah stressed the importance of the international community to step up the fight against terrorist groups. Hala Dababne for the news at 10.
Russia appears to seize the initiative in international efforts to end the conflict in Syria. Washington is also seeking to devise a new strategy for the war-ravaged country, and France had sent warplanes to bomb Daesh targets. As leaders gathered in New York at the United Nations General Assembly, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry discussed Syria with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. In his address to the Assembly, Russian President Vladimir Putin said it was a huge mistake not to cooperate with the Assad's military, which he said was the only force truly fighting Daesh militants in the country. However, U.S. President Barack Obama described Assad as a tyrant and the chief culprit behind the civil war in Syria. Obama insisted there could not be a return to the status quo under Assad, but he did not explicitly call for Assad's ouster and suggested there could be a managed transition away from his rule. Obama said Washington is willing to work with Iran and Russia to end the Syrian conflict. In New York, Her Majesty Queen Rani Al Abdullah attended the opening session of the 6th Annual Social Goods Summit in partnership with Project Everyone. The Queen presented the Sustainable Development Goal number 4 to the audience, a goal that aims to give every child quality education and to promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Queen Rania stressed everyone has a right to education, saying deprive children of quality education and you deprive them of the opportunities that can help them break out of the cycle of poverty. She described the cycle of poverty as a cycle that traps people in disadvantage, adding that it is a cycle that puts girls at risk of violence and slows the growth of our global economy. The Sustainable Development Goals were set after 193 countries arrived at a consensus on the 17 proposed goals, which aim to end poverty and hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages, as well as inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Here at home, Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour chaired a meeting at the Ministry of Energy, the Mineral Resources, to discuss a blueprint national energy supply strategy for the next 10 years. The blueprint will soon be presented to the Cabinet and be incorporated into the next state budget. Mansour told the meeting that the energy sector has paramount impact on the Jordanian economy and future growth in the country. Energy, he said, had posed the biggest problem to the economy as it posted a debt of 5 billion dinars. He told the meeting with the Energy Minister Ibrahim Saif, National Electricity Company Board Chairman Khaldun Qtayshat, Energy Sector Regulatory Commission Head Farouk Hiyari, and senior ministry staff that the heavily indebted energy sector needed a thorough study to take the right decisions. Mansour also spoke of the need for a diversity of safe energy sources and to press ahead with key energy projects. Dozens of Palestinian worshippers were injured in violent clashes that erupted at the flashpoint at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in occupied East Jerusalem. The Jerusalem Awqaf Department said in a statement that some 150 Israeli soldiers stormed the mosque grounds and started to expel locals by attacking worshippers and firing sound grenades and rubber bullets. The statement added that firefighters were able to extinguish a blaze that erupted during the confrontations. The statement said Israeli forces used military vehicles to remove the woods and windows of the Al-Qibla Mosque. Also in occupied Jerusalem, Israeli forces arrested 4 Palestinian children in the Mount of Olives neighborhood. The Palestinian Prisoner Club in Jerusalem said the children were taken to a detention and investigation center in the city, claiming they threw stones against Israeli soldiers. Israel has introduced stiffer penalties against Palestinians, throwing rocks or Molotov cocktails on Israeli soldiers and police. Chelsea held a training session in London before flying to Portugal to face Porto tomorrow in the second round of Champions League matches. Chelsea's comfortable 4-0 win at home to Maccabi Tel Aviv on Group G match day 1 was a welcome respite after 2 successive Premier League defeats. The Blues subsequently beat Arsenal 2-0 and on last Saturday were held 2-2 at Newcastle United. Porto remained top of the Portuguese table on the goal differences from Sporting Lisbon and are unbeaten in 12 games in all competitions. And we stay in England, in West Sussex, where drivers took part in the Lawnmower World Championships. The village of Coneyhurst was the venue of the competition, which boasts a number of categories, including races with the buggy-like mowers and traditional mowers with seats attached. The drivers had to defend their lead over 5 laps per heat, and scores are given on a sliding scale of points for each race according to their checkered flag finish. And finally, a look at the weather forecast. Pleasant in most regions for the rest of tonight and moderate in the Jordan Valley and the Gulf of Aqaba with northwesterly light winds. As for tomorrow, similar conditions will prevail in Amman, the hilly areas and Badi regions, but it will remain hot in the Jordan Valley. Winds will be northwesterly moderate to brisk, turning dusty in the Badi region. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect a hot day tomorrow with northerly moderate to brisk winds and slightly rough seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here are our top stories once again. In his address to the UN General Assembly, His Majesty the King says the future is under a serious threat from the outlaws of Islam, and the world is united that terrorists must be defeated. Russia appears to seize the initiative in international efforts to end the conflict in Syria, while Washington seeks a new strategy for the war-ravaged country. And dozens of Palestinian worshippers are injured by Israeli forces in renewed clashes that erupted at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in occupied East Jerusalem. And with that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Luwa Balkar. Thank you for watching and have a good night.